relationship to the land as a form of spiritual practice. And as we have been doing, let me just begin with this land acknowledgement for just a moment. Over 500 years ago, the Pottawatomi, Ojibwe, and Odawa nations migrated from the Atlantic seaboard to this Great Lakes region. All Saints Parish, where we are right now, occupies unceded land of the Pokagon Band of the Pottawatomi, who were unwillingly removed from this land. Many of them suffered and died during that forced migration along what is known as the Pottawatomi Trail of Death. We grieve this injustice, and especially during this Lenten season, we are seeking ways for healing and for reconciliation. So thank you for coming, and I'm going to let our wonderful guest introduce herself more fully, but this is Kelly Church, and her spouse, or husband,
Jeff.
Is it Jeff?
Yes.
Yes. Wow, my brain is working this morning, that's good. And I double-checked to make sure I got this right, and I think this is so cool. Kelly is of Odawa, Ojibwe, and Pottawatomi descent, so she is representing the state of Michigan Indigenous people here this morning. So glad that you're here.
Miigwech. Thank you.
Yeah, just let me know.
Okay, I will. Ania Nishna, Kelly Church Indigenous Cause, Hopkins, Michigan, Nadojimo. And so what I just said is, hello, how are you? My name is Kelly Church, and I'm from Hopkins, Michigan. I said that in our native language, which was one of the first languages spoken in this area. I am not fluent in that language because there has been many things that happened over the years to where we kind of lost that language, but our generations are really coming back to it and hoping to bring it back today. My daughter's actually a linguist, and so she says to me all the time, you know, that our culture is part of who we are, but our language makes us who we are. So that identifies us as our people, and that is one of the closest things to our identities, is our language. So while I know very little, I am still always hanging on to the hope that I'll always learn more. I am a black ash basket weaver. So like he said, I'm from the Gun Lake Band, which is right here in Allegan. And so the Gun Lake Band is made up of Pottawatomi and Ottawa. And then I'm also a descendant of the Grand Traverse Band, which is up north, which is Ottawa and Ojibwe. We call ourselves Anishinaabe, which means the first people or the people who were placed here. So this is a picture of my family from 1919. What's really interesting about this photo is this is also during a pandemic. So this was the time during the Spanish flu pandemic. We did lose a lot of our native people. All of the people in this picture did survive during the pandemic, but we also had very close-knit communities. Back in 1919, when churches were being built, I always found this really interesting. I went up to Keewaydin with my grandmother, and we went to this beach. And she said, when I was little, I was not allowed on this beach. It was only for the non-native people. And then my tribe bought the beach. So then we could go on the beach, but we also let them on the beach. We weren't so exclusive like that. But my grandmother, I said, why is there two churches right by each other? And she said, well, because that's the white church and that's the Indian church. So there's always been this kind of separation of our people, which during this time probably was a good thing, because then they were kept more safe. But the ones who worked in the lumber yards, there was a lot of death. Because I wondered, you know, how all of these guys made it through the pandemic that we're in now, because I've lost some family members, and it was really hard on a lot of our native people during this pandemic. So this is my family from 1919. I'm a black ash basket weaver, black ash baskets, and I love it that he did in his acknowledgement that we migrated from the eastern seaboard. So black ash baskets come from a tree called the black ash tree. But this black ash tree is more than just a tree to us. It's actually where we come from. So we did migrate from the eastern seaboard, from the people of the Wabanaki. The Wabanaki have a creation story, and this is where they believe they come from. And we believe we came dancing out of the black ash trees. So this tree isn't just a tree to us, it's literally part of who we are, it's part of our blood memories, it's part of our hearts, our spirits, and our culture. And so this is my family, and I love to point this out. This little tiny boy here, you can hardly see him, but he is 2 years old. That's my grandfather. And then this is his mother. She's holding some splints. This is his aunt. And these are all of his aunts. So all of these sisters back in the day were the community doctors. They would gather herbs and roots from the forest, and they would take care of everyone in the community before we had doctors. And what they're doing is making black ash baskets. So we did that for utilitarian purposes, which I'll be leaving a utilitarian basket behind today with you guys, so you could use it for offering collections. We do that in our churches. But also, we use those for tourists to kind of like when they started having stores and we weren't hunting for our food and gathering berries and going to the store to buy stuff, then they started selling these baskets. We were over by Sandy Pines, so if any of you know Sandy Pines in Allegan County, it's a real touristy place. Back in the day, that's right where my grandfather lived, like right on Sandy Pines land, right behind it. And he said that they would throw a blanket down, put all the baskets out for the tourists to come by, and he hated it. No, because you know, he was a kid, he didn't want to sell baskets. So the first thing we do, black ash is part of who we are. You have to know your tree, you have to know your land, your area, you have to understand it, you have to know the times of year to go to harvest certain trees. But black ash is one tree we can harvest all year long. You just have to be able to identify it at the different times of year. So I'm always identifying first by the bark of the tree, and this is the bark of the black ash tree. It's a hardwood tree, and while it might look just like a normal bark of any old tree to you, once you start honing in on barks of trees, and I always encourage people to do this, just start looking at trees outside and you'll start to see the very differences in them. Some of the bark is thicker, some you could put your fingers in and feel it, some is very smooth, some is like corkboard, like this black ash is kind of like corkboard. I can run my fingers across it, it will flake, but sometimes it's also thick. But your eyes start to become used to the different barks of the trees, just like all of us. We're all different, and so are the barks of the trees. So when I go into the woods, I don't know all of my trees, but my eyes are really adept at ash. So I can be like, there's black ash, white ash, not ash, not ash, not ash. So I have learned a lot of the forest trees that are in the swamps. And that is where black ash trees grow. So when we take our children out to the woods, everything we do is visually or oral storytelling. And of course, we've told our stories, and I think people are like, wow, they've never thought to print this before. No, we don't print our stories because we believe that if we print our stories in books, like so many people do, then you always feel safe that it is there and that you have access to it, but you forget to pass it on. So when we have our oral storytellings, part of that tradition is to not record it, to not have that somewhere so viable for you, because you're always supposed to pass it on, and that is your responsibility. If everything is always safe, then you forget it. And we can look to that today with history. Our histories have been written. If you're not interested in history, you might not look at it, and history can repeat itself so easily by something that is recorded, but you're not continually passing that history on. So when we identify our buds in the winter, we're looking for this little chocolate chip, and it really does look like a chocolate chip at the end of the bud, and it's black, so that's why this tree is called the black ash tree. It translates to like Fraxinus niagara or something like that, Niagara. And then this is how we identify it in the summer, and what's really unique about it is it does not have a stem off of the main leaf. So you don't see a little tiny stem there. The leaves attach right to the main stem. So when I'm out in the woods looking for trees, I can get binoculars, they're pretty high up, and then I can see that, and that's how I just make sure I'm getting the right tree. I'm really good at the bark now, but elm and black ash are really confusing sometimes. So this is what a black ash tree looks like when you're out in the woods. You can see, some of these this is not a black ash tree, but you can see how trees all look different, how they run straight or not run straight. A good basket tree, there could be 40 black ash trees in the woods, maybe only 4 are going to be good for baskets. So we're not going out there and like, wow, there's like a whole bunch of black ash trees, let's take them home. We will look for a good basket tree, which means the bark is growing straight, it's not curved, it doesn't have any of this because we'll be pounding on that and using the growth rings. So that's what we're looking for. I can see that's a black ash tree back there, but you can see it's a little bit of a curved tree. I can see some variations there, so that would have not been good. But this was a beautiful black ash tree, one of the last ones we harvested from the lower peninsula of Michigan. So then we pass on the teachings of processing, and we do this visually. You know, I could tell everybody all day long about how to do it, but experiencing it is the one way to really learn it. So I take little kids out in the woods, give them really sharp axes and knives, and I'm like, come on, let's go. So these guys, you also teach them about these sharp axes and knives. So while I am giving them these tools, these little boys that I worked with, their mom held their knives, and you know, they got them out during basket time, not during playtime, because boys can play. And they learned how to do all of this. So these little boys, this is Gigik. He's learning how to cut down the tree, and so he's harvesting a black ash tree there. My husband was deep in the woods with them, so he's probably off to the side. But these were really strong little boys. He's only 13. He's 12 years old, and he's pounding on the ash. Now, to get the ash to come off, we have to hit it with the backside of an axe. You have a little 2-inch width. You're pounding it as hard as you're chopping wood, and the back of an axe is about 1 inch wide, so you're overlapping that axe every 1/2 inch. And these guys wanted to go fishing, so I said, go out there and pound a set of splints, and do something else, and then they could go fishing. And they just pounded that right off. Now this one, if you play this one's a video. So it's just a really short clip. This is what it sounds like when you pound the black ash. Oh, it's not coming up. What I call this is the heartbeat of the black ash basket, because when we pound on our ash, it makes this beautiful resounding noise. And if it doesn't, just believe me. Oh, that's okay. You know, it's okay it's not doing it. What it sounds like, though, is when you hit that axe on the log, it makes this nice resounding noise. We can hear it almost 1/4 mile down the road, sometimes the 1/8 mile, depending on, you know, I live in the country, so I don't really have a lot of Wi-Fi. There's a lot of trees, but it will carry down the road. So in the old days, when people were pounding, they would say, oh, it sounds like the pigeons are working on baskets today, because it would be a slower pound. Or it sounds like, you know, the churches are working on baskets. It might be a little bit quicker pound. You could hear in the way that someone pounded their ash, that, you know, who might be working in the neighborhood. And also, there's not a lot of black ash basket weavers. It's really hard work, so you could kind of limit it down that way too. So this is how, after you pound on the growth rings, you're pounding as hard as you're chopping wood. That separates all the fibers in between the growth rings. They begin to separate and release. So you can see these growth rings here are separating. This is my husband pulling them up. So after he pounds, he begins to pull it up. Now, if those splints come up easily, then you have pounded enough. If you have to yank on it, then you just start pounding again. We never yank the splints up. We're pounding and releasing the splints. Then we put them in this contraption called a splitter. That's what my grandfather was on when he was 2. He was holding on to a splitter in that photo. So we've been using these for well over 100 years, a few hundred years. It's a contraption we made to kind of hold the growth ring in place to split it. And then the next one shows how we split it. So when we have this growth ring, it's about the thickness of a nickel, and then I will score it, and then I will just peel it in half. So the inside of the growth ring is smooth, it's shiny, it's silky. The outside of the growth ring is a little bit rougher. So after I get done splitting all of those growth rings, you have all of this beautiful basket weaving material, and this is where we begin the baskets. So these are traditional things that we have been making since before this country existed, because we needed ways to carry our babies, we needed ways to go through the snow. So cradle boards and snowshoes were made out of ash, because ash is so unique It's just a wonderful material. When you have it nice and thick, we can actually steam it and shape it over some steam, over a boiling pot of water. And then we can hang it up, and like we'll have some notches in certain places, and then it will dry like that. So you can do the same thing with your snowshoes. Then they would use the inside of rawhide to do those snowshoes together, which help you walk through some of our really wonderful forest, in the wintertime. Now this basket here is made out of all natural materials. This is what the black ash tree looks like on the inside. The embellishments are to help beautify it, but what their main purpose is to give it more strength. So there is beauty and strength there. So it's already wove, it's plated, and then we add the curlicues over it, so it makes it a much sturdier basket. These are more baskets that we started to make as we began to adapt. Like when my grandfather said, all the tourists would come around. Then they're making a little bit more fancy baskets for the tourist's sake. Now we use the baskets utilitarian, so this was a market basket that we would use to go pick up flour or whatever we might be getting from the market. So they had a real purpose for them. We also had some that had 2 handles on them that we would carry our babies in. So as we started to sell baskets to non-native people for non-utilitarian purposes, they would put them on their shelves and, for pretty stuff. So then we just made them prettier. So this is the emerald ash borer. Now, when you begin to lose something that you've had forever, I'm just going to use that word, then you have to look at, how you can sustain it. Because it's not just about us today, it's always about 7 generations. So we look back at the generations before us and how they've sustained it to us today. We're looking ahead at the next generations ahead of us to make sure we sustain it for them. Why is it important to sustain black ash baskets? I mean, I can go to the dollar store and buy a basket for $1, right? It's important for so many reasons. It's important because our black ash is, remember, part of our spirituality. We come dancing from the black ash trees. And then the Wabanaki people foresaw, there's this prophecy that they had of non-native people coming. And they saw the things that would happen, that we would lose our culture and we would lose our language and our traditions. So the story among the Wabanaki, and I actually got to be friends with the Wabanaki lady. I know I come from there, but I don't know the original story. She lives there, so she knows the story of what happened before I left. And she told me one day, I told her, my people migrated from the eastern seaboard. And she said, we sent away half of our people before the non-native people came. It was to save our traditions, to save our language, and to save our culture. And so we migrated to where the food grows on water. So the Great Lakes is where the wild rice grows. And this is where we ended up. So there was 7 stopping places all around the Great Lakes. Lake St. Clair, up in the UP, there's Sault Ste. Marie, Manitoulin Island, but there's 7 stopping places that my people came from, and I come from those people, not at all 7 places, but I come from those people. So this is where our people are today. And we have this, now the emerald ash borer was brought in by some untreated shipping crates from China, which, we can't always see everything that's in them, but that's how the emerald ash borer was introduced to us. It's been devastating all of our black ash trees. And so the whole mitten of Michigan is devastated of harvestable black ash trees. What we have growing now are, I think 2012 is one of the last times they seeded. So when the seeds go to the ground, those little saplings are coming up. The emerald ash borer likes little saplings too, and the researchers from MSU who discovered the emerald ash borer said that we'll just have to wait for the emerald ash borer to kind of leave an area, see if our trees can grow, and then there's also, the trees might gain their own resistance to the emerald ash borer as they did in Asia. It took a few decades. So this was in Brighton, Michigan, about 2010 or so. We were bringing some people from Maine, the Wabanaki people, to show them what was happening in Michigan. And we peeled back some bark, and that little guy was right there. And he, literally, my picture is not as good as my friend's, but he just looked right at us, like, you're waking me up, and you just took away my cover. And we couldn't even believe we got one that close, but that is what they do. They bore in, they're actually little tiny eggs they start out as. They turn into a larvae, maybe about 1 inch long. They make galleries through the wood, and this was the first tree I harvested with an infestation in 2009, and this was up at Elk Rapids. And then it sucks all the nutrients from the tree. They shrink down to a little beetle, and they bore their way out. Now this thick bark is pretty thick, so if anyone wants to touch it after, you can see. That little tiny beetle just looks like a little weakling, but he can bore his way out of this, which is pretty amazing. So he's a really hardy bug. It can live at 40 below zero. It has to be sustained for weeks for it to die. We never get that here in Michigan. And also heat treatments, you have to go over like 150 degrees or so. And around the world, they had certain heat treatments that weren't hot enough to kill the emerald ash borer. So it's kind of like a little cockroach. He's a really hardy little guy. Now, this is the way that we will sustain this tradition, along with our teachings that we will continue today for as long as we can. So we have seed collection that we will do. You can't see these really well. I think I focused a little bit on there, but if you see in the background, there's these bigger fuzzy things. They're not the leaf buds. What they are is the beginning of flowering seeds. When I see those in April or May, I know that seeds will come that summer, and then we should collect. So these little fluffy things will turn into these, and at the end of summer, about September to October, is when you collect the seeds and you try and get them before the weather does, because the weather's getting crazy then, and it might knock them down. But this is something that we should all do with all species, is collect seeds. Pine cones on pine trees are seeds, because the health of our forest is needing help right now. So now today, I still use the same traditional ways as we have from thousands of years ago. I always tell people, before this country was a country, that long ago, plus some. And I use the same teachings and the same everything, but I turn it into my stories of today. I live in today just like all of you. So, sometimes people are like, well, that's not traditional. And I have to ask them, what is traditional? What point in time are you expecting me to live in? Am I 50 years ago, 100 years ago? Somebody telling me what is traditional is kind of crazy. But this is the traditional part. This is the part that is always traditional about everything I do. I'm still starting from that tree in the woods. I still have to harvest it, pound it, split it, scrape it. And one of the most important things we do before we do any of that is that we lay down tobacco and we say a prayer, because we're giving thanks to that tree. One tree can provide so many baskets and so many teachings for so many people. So we always tell that tree what we're going to do with it, who we're going to share it with, and how we're going to use it before we take it. And so this basket tells about the emerald ash borer. It is green. The emerald ash borer has a copper belly. I use these. I love to talk about the emerald ash borer and the devastation it's doing in Michigan, because we've lost over 500 million ash trees. We have about 803 million. And nobody wants to hear about a bug if you're just carrying it around. But if I put a bug inside a pretty basket, and then they open it up, they're like, oh, wow, then it's easier to talk about it, because they're intrigued by the basket. Then you can kind of get their interest. Isn't it funny how you can get people's interest? You got to give them something pretty. No. And then this one is about the water. We live in the Great Lakes. We are so lucky. When I moved to Santa Fe, I realized how precious our water is. They don't have hardly any down there. When it rains, it's amazing. So our water in the Great Lakes makes up 21% of the world's fresh water. We are so lucky to have that fresh water here. We need to protect it with all of our might. We can't wait to clean it up later. This is about the pipeline. And however anyone feels, money is not going to be more important than water. We can't drink money. Money will not sustain us, but water always will. And so this whole hat talks about the importance of water and removing the pipeline. And then up here I have water from Lake Michigan. Our copper used to be like float copper. I have wild rice, which grows in the water. Our black ash grows in swamps, so it requires water. We have so many things besides us that require water. And then this one is actually at Hope College. I had to include this one. So Hope College here in Holland purchased this egg. This one's called Traditional Transformations because we are losing our ash trees. And so how will we sustain this tradition? Right now we can sustain it with maybe other materials, but still passing on the original teachings of the tradition until the trees come back and we can replant seeds and let them grow back. So this is kind of showing, yeah, we can use other materials, but we should not have to. We should not always have to depend on things we make today. What if there comes a time when those resources are gone, or the knowledge is gone to make them, or all the electricity goes out? You know, where are we then? So we need to think about those things. And then this one speaks about black ash and cedar and how these two habitats, they kind of have to fight for their survival in the woods, but they're also both struggling in the woods. Pesticides are sometimes in the woods, especially in the Northwest coast. My friend harvests cedar trees and they fly over and they put some kind of pesticides in the trees, so when the cedar weavers harvest and they put it in their mouths, they get sick. So there's always different things that we're fighting with in the woods, not just bugs, but also man-made implications. So this is going to be one of the most important baskets of the future, and it is this little tiny black ash basket. We can only make these 4 to 6 weeks out of the year. When the sap is running behind the tree, it's not every May 1st, so it depends on the weather. If we have an early spring, then it will be around May, June. If we have a late one, it'll be around, or a normal around June, and then a late one around June, July. So it depends on our weather. When I harvest trees, I don't harvest for the bark, I harvest for the growth rings. So if the bark is coming off, we can make these baskets, and you can see they're peeling off that bark in one piece. That bark is really flexible. You can move it all over for a few hours. Then we can shape baskets like this. I can also write inside of them. So I've been writing stories about today inside these baskets. So I call them teaching tools. The bark is a teaching tool to show us in the future, when we replant our seeds, what that tree looks like. Because if you don't have the trees, it's hard to identify it. So that will be an identification. But also, we can write stories in it. This one says, "May the forest be with you," because it has Yoda in there. But it does keep our messages. And even that is a message, because in the future, someone's going to be like, "Who's Yoda, and what does 'May the forest be with you' mean?" And then they'll look it up. So this is where I am really bad at technology, but I wanted to remind myself some things to say. So as the future generations depend more on technology, the farther away they are from what sustains them and what sustains all of us, our environment and all that it offers, without asking for anything in return. We have the earth right here, giving to us every day, and it never asks for anything in return, but we should be there. So, the trees in our forests provide the air that you're breathing in right now. The water the earth provides sustains your life. Without it, we would perish within a week. Our bodies are made of 60% water. Water is critical. We are so lucky in Michigan. We all need to wrap our minds around that. And the earth provides the nutrients that grow the foods we eat to survive. So we are dependent on this earth for our everyday living, and so we can all contribute to the health of our environment by first recognizing it for the sustenance that it provides, and taking care and providing, taking part in caring for it with acts big or small. Planting trees, collecting seeds, planting seeds, clean a neighborhood, drive less, walk more, stop using pesticides for beautiful lawns. If you came to my house, you would just think I was the laziest person in the world, because I literally have just a small spot cleared for a little, space to sit, a garden, but the rest is the trees. I don't really rake because the leaves are good for the earth and the environment, and people mostly just rake their leaves and do all that stuff so they can look good for each other. I don't care if I look good for you. No, I'm kidding. I don't care what my yard looks like, because my yard is healthier in the way that it looks. And although it doesn't look organized and kept, it really is kept in a way that is more natural for it and better for our environment. So As we've been losing our black ash, we have been looking at other materials in Michigan that we also have that we need to be aware of, and we can also protect and help and sustain. And so sweetgrass is one of those. We put sweetgrass in our baskets occasionally. I know I have it in some of these here. So sweetgrass is something that we can make baskets out of as well. This is a mixture of black ash and sweetgrass. This I kind of can grow behind my house. It's so crazy. If I grew it in my yard, you guys, the whole yard would be sweetgrass like right away. But then you have to sort it out and pick it from real grass, so it gets a little tricky. I grow it in beds to make it easier. Birch bark, that's something that we don't have plentiful in downstate Michigan, but down this way there's some birch bark. So, but not really where I live. Where I live, it's more ornamental. It'll be in someone's yard. Of course, the birds will eat the seeds and then go somewhere and, you know, lay those seeds somewhere else when they go to the bathroom, and then more birch trees will come up. But we don't really have tons of birch downstate. And so when I harvest birch, I normally start looking about mile marker 120. That's really where you start seeing the birch a lot, and then we can start seeing what we're doing. So we make winnowing baskets out of birch, utilitarian baskets. We also do birch bark bitings, and these are done with our teeth on really thin pieces of bark, because birch bark has about 15 to 20 layers. Now, these are some of the art pieces that I make today, and this one is actually here. On this thing, and I love it because I can do this with it. So this right here really talks about, kind of ties in churches and us today. Now with churches were one of the downfalls of Native people in not good ways, but there's also one of the ways that we survived. So when the non-Native people came into Michigan, one of the first things they were going to do, oh, first I should have told you guys this. My dad's a historian. So my dad passed away during the pandemic. He did get COVID. That was devastating for me. But it's also a lesson to us all, you know, that take things serious. And he died just before the shots. So as careful as we all were, it was not careful enough at that time. So this piece here speaks about, my dad would say, the churches saved us in the way that when they were going to send in 1,200 troops to remove all of our people, a lot of the Pottawatomi people had already been removed, as he spoke of. There was a lot of us left, and so they were going to send in 1,200 troops to make sure the rest of us left. I was part of those people. We were supposed to move to Kansas. It took them 2 years to realize that we didn't show up. Then they're like, where are these people? So they came back to Michigan. They were going to send in 1,200 troops. We had a lot of warriors in Michigan, and where a lot of people associate themselves with, I'm the Indian from Fort Snell or Fort this or Fort that. We in Michigan do never call ourselves the Fort Indians at all. And that's because there were 8 forts, and we took them all over, and we just we ambushed them. We overtook all the forts. Chief Pontiac led that revolt. The natives in Michigan never lost a war. And so I'm happy to say that we always stood our ground. I'm not happy to say that we always won. Like, yeah, we always won, but we never lost a war with the United States or with other nations. So that is why we are in Michigan today, and it is all Anishinaabe. In most states, you'll have a mixture of different Native tribes in the state. Here in Michigan, we're one of those unique states, like Maine, where we have all Anishinaabe tribes in the state. In Maine, they have all Wabanaki tribes. So in that way, we are very unique that we have a true Anishinaabe culture here. So this piece speaks here about our blood memories that we have. These are here are representative of the braids that were cut off during the boarding school days. The boarding school days were normally led by churches, and I think this is one way too that we can all, we can all come together by talking about it. It's a painful history. But if I can't talk about it with you guys and have you listen, then how can we ever recognize that history and come together on it? It needs to be acknowledged, and it needs to be acknowledged in a bigger way than it has been. So these are the braids that were cut off our children when they would first get to the schools. What they were trying to do is take the we out of our people and replace it with I. They were trying to take away all of our culture. So these hands here represent the children at the schools. Orange is a color for them. So this is, we have to have colors for everything. So we have red for our missing and murdered Indigenous women. We have orange for our children. And so it's to help us remember And of course, we'll never forget. So this is called DNAs in our blood memories. That is something all of you even have. Whatever your culture is that you come from, maybe someone in your family didn't, I love this because it was like American Scientific or Scientific American magazine. It said, if your great-great-grandfather didn't like cornbread, you might not either, based on a blood memory, just a memory passed down, and you will have no reason not to like that cornbread. So I got that for beets. I don't know who didn't like beets a few generations ago, but I don't like beets, and you can't get me to try a beet, and I've never had one, but I don't like beets. So that is part of that, but it also goes with our basketry, our culture, our language, our teachings. It is in our blood memories. So we all have different memories. Maybe you're from a Polish ancestry, and you have blood memories of making Polish bread, or something like this, but it is in all of us. So this piece is about our blood memories, the good and the bad. The churches saved us in the way that we organized, and so they didn't send in those warriors because they didn't send in the 1,200 troops because we had warriors, but our Native people also started building our own churches. That's why we have the Salem Indian Mission, we have the Bradley Indian Mission, we have Indian missions in Keewaydin and up in Northport. We have them all over. We began making our own churches because we recognized that, you guys recognized that that was a good thing. And also it gave us a structure of government that we could work with the non-Native people in the communities. So this talks about how they tried to take away our language, our culture, and the way that we did things together. So this is how, this whole piece speaks of how my people, my family, when I say my family, I mean my community. We are a big family. So while I'm related to almost all the black ash basket weavers in Michigan, and we're a really big family, in the bigger sense, I'm related to a lot of natives around. So this speaks about how we retain the culture. While these children were being sometimes, beat for speaking their language, my grandmother told me she spoke the language once at Mount Pleasant School, and she had to go into a storeroom and scrub the floor. She was a little girl, so I'm sure it was scary for her, but it did teach her not to speak Anishinaabe Moan at school anymore, but when she got home, her dad's like, no English here. So my grandmother was a fluent speaker until she passed away, but she did not pass it on, and she sat in a chair really sad one day, and she shook her head, and I said, what's the matter, Grandma? And she said, I'm sad I didn't pass on the language to your father. And I said, why didn't you? And she said, because I didn't want to hold him back, because that's what she felt like our culture was doing. She was taught that it would hold her back, so she did not pass it on. But my generation is a generation away from that. So while we still have those blood memories, we also have this strength in us that we want to relearn and know everything that is out there to know. So my daughter is a linguist. She is studying our language. Well, in the old days, we would have known our language. We would have just done all of this naturally. We all have some specialties today. I'm the tree girl. I can tell you anything about trees and work with trees. I'm working with birch bark here. There's cedar. There's black ash. But if you ask me a lot of words about how to say these, I will have to tell you I don't know and refer you on to that language person, which would be my daughter. So this just talks about our blood memories and all of the teachings that we retained despite it having them trying to beat the language or such out of our earlier generations. And one thing I always like to point out to people is that if you find a child, a 3-year-old baby maybe in the woods somewhere, a cold case would be started. You guys would see it on the news every day. This 3-year-old baby, it was found here. Any tips? When we find children at these schools where they were, and it was in 2020, a baby was found on the church ground up at Holy Cross up in Petoskey. You guys didn't hear about it. I barely heard about it. I saw it on Facebook. So even today, our people are not treated equally. And so these are some of the ways that we can all come together by recognizing, speaking about it, acknowledging, and listening, also hearing what is being said. Listening and hearing are two different things. We can all listen, but are you actually hearing the words? So all of my work today tells stories, so that is that story. But also remember, the churches weren't always our enemies. The churches is how we started to get into the communities and build that trust. So our churches have been our friend and our foe. But my grandfather was our Native community leader for 42 years, and he presided over the Salem Indian Mission for 42 years, and he did Bradley for 14. So my grandfather would always say, you can preach to them for about 20 minutes before you lose them. And then, yeah, so the first 20 they're hearing, get your good stuff in there. And then he would start, like bringing the kids up, and he would divide it up a little bit. But my grandfather would always, do that. And he always did this when he spoke. I'll just never forget that. He'd always raise up on his toes and then, so. So I believe in the power of prayer. I believe in, fellowship and community, and that is one of the most important things that we all have with each other is together we are stronger. One person can do a lot, but boy, if a lot of people come together, we can do so much more. So these masks I made during the pandemic when I was unable to harvest. I started making masks. This is one of the first few that I made was quilling, and I had to do it on birch bark. I was unable to get black ash, but I had these materials in my house, so I started making masks. And it was to show that we can have compassion and caring for each other by wearing masks, but you can also, some of the message are about, breathing. Just, wear a mask and breathe. Sometimes breath is taken away from people because we all know what happened to George Floyd. And that is where a lot of these recognitions come from. What happened to George Floyd is a horrible, horrible thing, but George Floyd really did wake up the world. He woke up the world in a way that people are acknowledging that, let's see, here's one thing. As a Native artist, a lot of my art is collected, and it will be in a little room. If you guys go to a big, huge museum, there will be the, Western wing, the Asian wing, the da-da-da-da-da. Every single wing in there is going to have a great, big, huge place. Look for the Native Gallery. You will have to look for the Native Gallery. And then also, it will be rotating art. You'll see it for a minute where everyone else is on permanent display. So we're never really permanent. So today, we are becoming more permanent. We are being collected as, sometimes we're collected in natural history along with the dinosaur bones. We're being collected as people today. And I'm happy to share it, but I'm also like, I'm a little, haven't been there yet to see it. So when I see things, it's always more real. But I saw a picture. But anyway, they put one of my basket eggs inside the American Gallery at the Art Institute of Chicago. And so that is a really big step forward. That's them acknowledging us, not just as Native people, but as people of the Americas, the first people of the Americas. And so I am telling my story along with other artists. And so this is the picture they showed me. They showed me a picture of this wall, like back there where those beautiful stained glass are. It's all surrounded with people. And if you know Nighthawks by Edward Hopper, or wait, Nighthawks by, okay, by Edward Hopper, yeah. So that painting is against the wall, so everyone's crowding it, and so the man goes, and this is your egg right up here. There's no one around it, but it's in the same room. So anyway, that was his thing. He's like, hey, you're in the same room as Edward Hopper. So anyway, I'm excited to go see that, but that is what George Floyd's passing did. It made people wake up to some of these things that have always been there, but that goes back to the history part. We have it written down. We need to keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it, not just write it down. We need to talk about it so we keep the conversation going and do not repeat history. Just do not repeat history. So this one right here is made out of my black ash and copper. As we lose our materials, I incorporate a lot of copper into our work, and also the purest copper in the world comes from the Great Lakes of Michigan. So that's something for all of us to be proud of. Copper is a very healing material. So I call this Let Us Heal. I just made some with like birch bark and beads, but I did a lot of masks during that time. This one right here is called The Emergence of We. This is a half female, half male butterfly, which are very rare and beautiful. There's been like 3 discovered in the world. The first time they called it an oddity. It's unusual, and they weren't very complimentary about it. The second one they found is the one I did, and they called it beautiful and rare. And so half male, half female, we have 2 spirits in our tribes. and there are people that might be feminine but act more masculine, or masculine act more feminine. There's 7 different variations of it. I always joke with my husband, I could be one of those because I'm a girl who, me and my daughter are tomboys. So we're not necessarily, I always told him, if the girls went to the beach, then I was out. I'm like, who wants to sit in the sun all day? I can get tan in a window. So, so this here is bringing our communities together. It's called the emergence of we because they tried to take the we out of our children and replace it with I. So this is the emergence of all of us, all of our people, all of our male, all of our female, all of our two spirits, all spirits, all of our people, all of us together. This is the emergence of all of us because too much I is too much me, and we is always better. So this is one of the things that I try to draw people in. So this is an egg I call You Can't Drink Money. And then it would open up to money. It came out of the exhibit. So I had a little piece of a $1 bill in a jar, and then I had some water. So it's just to show, that, yeah, we build pipelines. How long do you get those jobs for? And then that's it. The money is momentarily. The water is forever. And when natives are protecting water, they're not protecting it just for ourselves. We're protecting it for everything. So these black lines represent all of the ways our waterways connect. Lake Michigan is connected to many waterways through the outflows and the rivers and streams. And so when our water got polluted in Marshall by Enbridge, it's still going downstream and affecting things today. And so all of our waters are connected. Now Enbridge needs to get out of that Great Lake. And then this right here, I call it the Michigan Indian History Hat. This is my family that you saw in the beginning. So I wove them into the hat. These were our first black ash basket weavers, our community doctors. Every time I took my grandpa to the doctor, he'd say, I never had to go to the doctor. My mom was the doctor. And boy, she'd make me suck on this root called sweet flag, and it was so bitter. He had Alzheimer's, so I heard the same story every time I took him to the doctor. And so this here has different facts on it, like we were the first native farmers in Michigan. We were the first metal workers in Michigan. We have been working with copper since before this country was a country, of course, but that's not very long. So we've been working with copper for just hundreds of years. It tells about all the things we harvest in the state. So on the top I have sage, I have maple sugar, I have wild rice, I have sweetgrass, I have a black ash seed. I just have all kinds of little things on here. It shows all of the things that we need to protect. When we protect our water, we protect our land, we're protecting all of these nutrients, our trees to breathe. We are all integral in this part. So again, I guess if the one last message I could leave everyone is that together we're all stronger. We all share love for each other, and also that the earth gives to us and never asks for anything back. So give back what you can without being asked. And so that is all. You guys can come up and touch the art. Miigwech. Thank you. Yeah, I'll take questions.
We have just a few minutes left, but if you've got a comment or a question or anything you'd like to add.
Or if you want to touch anything, you can.
Is that an ash seed that you've got suspended in the middle there?
Yes. You know what? It's actually a piece of basswood. So this is actually bark from the basswood tree, black ash, and roots from the cedar tree. And so I took a piece of basswood, and it looks kind of like a canoe, which is traveling, but it's the cocoon that the little thing comes out of.
Thank you.
Butterfly.
Oh, yeah.
Is the black ash in Maine also endangered like ours? Yes, so black ash has been endangered everywhere. It started in Michigan in 2002, but the emerald ash borer had been here since 1992. It was just discovered in Maine last year, but it was here for 10 years before. I'm positive it had been there for a while. It just takes time to discover a bug that's that small. So the emerald ash borer has been making us do things a little different. Remember, I pass on things visually and orally, but I do have on a flash drive, in case we don't have black ash trees, to visually show them we do not have the teachings, that's how we always pass this on, but what if you don't have the components to go with your teachings? So in the future, we will have the seeds to replant. It takes 25 years to replant it, and then we can use that component and go back to teaching the way we always have. But if we don't have it recorded, you know, in other ways, and this will be, I also did it in our language, so you got to know our language to learn what you're seeing. Yeah, you guys can come up and look. Thank you so much for having me today. Miigwech is how I say thank you. And then we don't have a word for goodbye because we always believe we'll see each other again today here or somewhere else on our next journey. And so we say Bamapi Kuabman. And that means I will see you all again someday. So have a great Sunday. It's a beautiful one.
Thank you.
Okay.